What is your name? How old are you? And where are you from?
So I'm Theo, I'm 18 years old and I'm from a small town in the UK.
And do you have a family?
Yes, I have a family back in England, parents, brother and sister, and I also live with my granddad.
How many languages do you know and which one?
So of course I speak English. I learnt German in school, so my German is quite good, not fluent, and I'm starting to learn Russian, but it's still very bad.
Are you an extrovert or introvert?
It depends on the day. I'd say most people would probably say I am an introvert, but sometimes after many days of cycling by yourself, you become an extrovert when you meet somebody.
Do you have a job? Or
Well, I had 2 jobs before I started cycling. Now I quit. I worked in the vegetable garden at a hotel and also at a water sports shop.
okay, about your cycling life.
Yes.
How long have you been interested in cycling?
I suppose not very long actually. I think I saw a video on YouTube. Someone cycled from China to England called Josh Reed. That was the first time I became interested, but I did not really do much of that interest for a long time. I think only about 1 year before I started my journey, I actually started riding a bike, because before that I had not ridden a bike since I was a small child, maybe 12.
Why bike? Why not a motorcycle, not on foot, on feet?
I suppose it's just, I think it's the right speed. I only have about 9 months travelling, so I have time to see many places, but I want to also spend some time in each place, not just drive from one big city to the next. And with cycling, you are fast enough to cover big distances, but you see all the places in between as well.
How many bicycles do you have?
I would say 3. I have one from when I was like 12, and now the saddle is pulled up way out of the bike, so it looks a bit silly when I ride it. And 1 year before I started my trip, I bought a road bike, so I started to ride a bike again. And then just before I started the trip, I think about 1 week before, I bought my bicycle I'm touring on.
Do you training on a bike?
No, I was a runner, so I did do some fitness, obviously, but I did very little cycle training until quite close to when I started my journey. I cycled on my road bike with a friend. We did a 100-mile cycle ride, which is 160 kilometers. So, you know, I have, I guess, a very small amount of experience, but nothing major.
Maybe another type of training. You told me about running.
Yes, the running has definitely made it seem like an easier challenge, because I think if you do nothing at all it seems too difficult, but I know what it's like to do some exercise every day, so that made it seem like an easier idea in my head.
How do you rate your level as bike traveler? Like a beginner or advanced?
I was definitely a beginner when I started. I still don't think I'm, well, definitely not call myself advanced. I guess now I'm just somewhere in the middle after 4 months.
Okay. Do you prefer to ride alone or with a group of friends?
Well, that's a good question, but my journey has been mostly alone. I've
Yes.
spent a couple of times I've cycled with other people for about a week, so I have also know what it's like to cycle in a small group. I'd say I'm glad that I've had the experience to do both, but I expected my journey to be all by myself, so it's definitely good to have a change sometimes and have a friend to share the journey with.
How do you deal with the loneliness on a long trip?
I think it's much easier nowadays because we have things like the internet, which it feels a bit like cheating really, because whenever you want to you can send someone a message or call somebody, which of course we're very lucky to have, because only for a very recent period of history we've had that privilege. Before it would have been I think if I had done this trip 50 years ago, loneliness would have been a much bigger problem, because you have almost no contact with your family or any of your friends from back home. But now I haven't suffered so much, because in a way I feel like all of my friends and family are only as far away as it takes to take the phone out of my pocket.
Are you not afraid to travel alone?
Not really. Maybe you just call me stupid, but I try not to think about the risks, because you know, if worrying about what might happen does not change anything, because if you worry and you have a problem, it's the same as if you don't worry and then you have a problem.
How do you calculate the budget for long trips? Maybe for a day, for a month?
I do per day. Well, normally the only thing I spend money on is food, because almost every night I'm sleeping in a tent. So for food, I spend normally £5 to £8, so like maybe $6 to $10, something like this. And of course you have to pay for visas if you're going for a long trip through faraway countries. And yeah, the other expense is mainly bicycle problems. So for example, in Thailand I had to change my cassette, and in China I needed a new wheel. So of course you have to have some money to spare for these things.
What funds do you use to travel? Where you take money?
Yeah, so I was working until I started my trip. So
Before your trip?
yeah, so I was working from as soon as I finished school. I think maybe 1 week later I was working every day. So it's been, it was maybe not so fun when it's the summer and you're at work every day, but it means that you can fund your adventure.
What apps and devices do you use for navigation, for example?
So I just have my phone really. I have a compass if everything goes completely wrong, but yes, it's just my phone. So if I have internet, I use just online maps, but so Google Maps or Commute.
Yeah, on the smartphone.
Yeah, on my phone. So sometimes if I haven't been able to buy a SIM card or there's no connection, I use offline maps on Commute, or there's many apps, but my navigation is pretty simple. Again, pretty easy with everything is on your phone. It's a bit too easy maybe.
What is the role of photo video in your trips? What technique do you use for photo video?
I wouldn't say that my standard of documenting my trip is very high, really. The only thing I do is taking some photos on my phone. So normally quite blurry and taken of not the most beautiful things I see. So just random photos throughout the day, which I suppose it says something about my journey. It's not really about putting it on Instagram, it's more about the experiences that I have along the way.
Do you listen to music on the road? Your favorite music?
Yeah, so I've been listening to music quite a lot. It depends if my phone has got full battery or not. I normally turn my headphones off when I'm getting down to 30% or something. But no, I do like to listen to music. At the moment, I'm quite enjoying listening to the Killers. It's a band I'm enjoying at the moment, but you know, it changes over the kilometers.
Okay. What's the hardest thing about cycling?
Well, that's a good question. Some days are very easy, but some days it's when just everything seems to be against you. Maybe it's uphill, there's a headwind coming towards you, you've got a problem with your bicycle, you've got a problem with your body, your phone's out of battery, you've got no more water. Sometimes there are problems, I think, but you just have to remember that you don't experience the good times without going through some of the bad times as well.
Okay. What is your favorite part of the day for cycling? Maybe morning, maybe evening?
That's a good question. I'd say definitely not the morning. Well, it depends. Recently, when it's been cold and in the morning, all I want to do is cook some porridge and stay in my tent. The favourite part of the day, normally sometime in the cycling, maybe when there's you see a beautiful valley or something like that, maybe the wind stops for 2 minutes. You know, these times are probably, there's always that, almost every day there's, even on a bad day, there's normally a few good moments which make it a little bit better.
Why this road through Russia? Maybe you can go through China or...
Yeah, so I suppose it's mostly curiosity. China is also was a country I wanted to visit, so instead of thinking, do I want to visit China or Russia, I decided to go to both. So I ended up here because I really wanted to travel through Mongolia. And it was a great time. So then after Mongolia, I had to go back to China or into Russia. And I'd already been to China, so I decided, okay, now I will go to Russia. Of course, I had to decide this before I started because I had to get the visa in my back in the UK. But that was my thinking. So yes, I'm glad I made that decision, and it's been a really cool time actually. My highlight was probably crossing Lake Baikal on the ice. That was definitely something which I didn't plan on doing, but when I got there, I had the idea, and it was a great adventure.
What about visa? How do you solve the visa issue?
Yeah, so I've been lucky so far because I have the only 2 visas which I had problems with were China and Russia, and I decided to get them in the UK before I started. But I will start to have problems with visas as I continue my journey because I have no more visas now, so I have to apply for all the other visas I'm going to need somewhere in Central Asia, which will be interesting, but fingers crossed.
Where did you like the most during this trip?
I would maybe say Mongolia. I didn't know what to expect from Mongolia, but I really enjoyed the empty landscape, the kind people, and the nomad culture. That was something that was really interesting to see. So I'd say that's probably been one of the highlights so far.
How long have you been traveling in Russia and how many kilometers have you traveled?
In Russia it's been about 2 weeks, and I cycled around 800 kilometers, and then I took the train from Irkutsk to Novosibirsk.
Настоящий природный апокалипсис в Красноярском крае. Кадры будто из кино, но нет, реальность. В регионе бушует мощный ураган. Буря сносит все на своем пути. Со зданий срывает крыши. Огромные металлические листы раскидало будто бумажки. Разбиты машины, на дорогах завалы. И в большой опасности люди, которые в этот момент оказались на улице.
How many kilometers per day do you have?
Normally about 100 kilometers. Of course, sometimes more, sometimes less.
Yes, it depends.
Yes.
After Russia, will you continue to another country or?
Yes, I'll be travelling to Kazakhstan in the fairly near future, and start to head south.
What are the most impressive sites you visited in Russia?
Definitely say Lake Baikal. Seeing it completely frozen over and crossing it on the ice was a really impressive experience. It's just so big, and you know it's so deep, and I think lots of the world's fresh water is in Lake Baikal, and that was really interesting. Also, in Buryatia, I saw lots of the Buddhist temples, which I did not know about, so that was cool to see. And also, it's maybe normal for Russians, but to see the big forests is definitely a nice landscape to travel through by bicycle.
Where do you spend the night and how do you choose the place for stay?
So, almost always in my tent. So I normally start to look for somewhere to sleep about 6 o'clock, about maybe an hour or so before it gets dark, and I try to find somewhere a little bit away from a road where it's not quite so noisy, preferably a little bit hidden away, and I set up my tent. Maybe sometimes down if you see a dirt track leading off the side of a road, that's normally a good option. Of course, sometimes it's difficult to find a good spot, but I think in Russia there's quite a lot of good places to put your tent.
What is the scariest or most extreme thing that happened to you along the way?
At the start of my journey in Malaysia and Thailand, I was very scared of all the dogs, because this is something I've not experienced before coming from the UK. I was definitely scared because on the bicycle the dogs don't like you very much, and they chase you and bark at you. Now it doesn't bother me so much, because the first dogs are very scary, but when it's a 5,000th dog, they're not so scary anymore. So I'd say that was probably what I was most scared of.
What difficulties arise and how do you deal with them?
So there's all kinds of difficulties when you're cycling. Sometimes it's a problem with a bicycle. Maybe you have a puncture or something simple. Sometimes bigger problems, sometimes problems with your body, sometimes just problems with the road, the weather, all kind of things happen. I think it's just sometimes you just have to stop and have a think about how to deal with them. Sometimes there's nothing you can do, you just have to keep going. For example, what every cyclist hates is the headwind, and there's nothing you can really do about that. You just have to keep going.
Have you ever had moments when you wanted to drop everything and fly home?
Yes, of course, many moments. Sometimes just there are times when you just want to stop, put up your tent and go to sleep because of bad weather. But sometimes after some really tough days, or many tough days in a row, you just want to stop and get on a plane. But I think there's always half of you that wants to keep going and half of you that wants to stop, and you just have to listen to the right voice.
How do you organize your meals? Are there any favorite dishes?
Yeah, so recently I've been having porridge almost every morning for breakfast. It's quite easy with my stove. And lunchtimes, normally I try to stop at a cafe or a restaurant, which has been quite nice. In Russia the cafes are quite good, cheap nourishing food. So that's lunch, is all kinds of things really. Dinner, normally also cooking in my tent. Recently I've been having quite a lot of pasta dishes, but also other things, noodles, rice, those kind of things. They're all quite easy to cook on your little stove with your one pan. So those are probably some of my staple meals.
What do you want to try from the local cousins?
Well, you recommended to me blini, so I'll hopefully try some of them before I leave Russia. Also I tried the local flatbreads from the Central Asian style. They have a lot of them here in Novosibirsk, and that was tasty because I do love a good bread. And yes, it's always good to try local dishes because it's good to try something new, and it's a cultural experience.
Is the dish that has caused you confusion, admiration or disgust?
Yes, there's definitely been some foods which cause me disgust. Sometimes I think especially in Southeast Asia and China, they have some foods which just seem a bit crazy. For example, they eat scorpions on a stick, which is, after a long day of cycling, most foods taste pretty good.
What about your hygiene on the way? How you wash?
Yeah, so you can't take too many things when you're cycling, of course, but I have the standard things: soap, you always have water, of course, and stuff like to do teeth, toothbrush, toothpaste. It's not luxury, of course, when you're travelling by bicycle. You have to make compromises. It's definitely not so much hygiene, but I think it's all part of the experience.
Which road and surfaces do you prefer to drive on?
Well, I definitely like a bit of a mix of course, most of the miles are on asphalt, tarmac, but I don't mind being on tarmac, but when it's a busy road with cars close to you, it's not so fun. So it's also good to try and go on smaller roads. A bit of gravel when it's not too muddy is nice. It's always good to get away from the cars a little bit. have a more relaxing experience, more in the nature.
Okay. How do you like the roads in Russia and the traffic? Is it safe?
It depends which road you're on. I've had some really good roads, and some roads where you're being passed very closely by trucks, which is of course not so fun. And I've been, sometimes it's got very difficult to avoid the big roads, so that is why I ended up taking a train, one of the reasons. But yeah, the roads when there's not traffic, for example, my roads which have been really good in Russia, from Yatka to near Ulan-Ude, and from Bolshoye Golosnaya to Irkutsk. Those were really good roads, because there's not too many cars, and I had really good times on them.
What myths about the country and people did you hear before, and have they been confirmed or not?
I didn't really know what to expect from Russia. I didn't think I really knew any myths about Russia or what to expect, but when I arrived, people have been really nice to me. The Russian people have been often talking to me and asking me questions, so I'm glad that I spoke a little bit of Russian before I arrived, so that I was able to have small conversations about where I'm going. And yeah, people have been really nice, offering me cups of tea. People even offered me a place to stay near a Buddhist temple, which was cool. And of course, you have welcomed me into Novosibirsk, so thank you for that, Arsene.
You are welcome. Have you ever met wild animals?
I definitely met some wild animals, nothing too scary, but I saw my first monkeys in Malaysia and Thailand, which was cool. Also things like snakes, lizards, which is definitely something which you don't see too many of back home, and they're big over in Southeast Asia. You see other things like deer, eagles, even seen some wild horses, which is really interesting. But I haven't seen anything too scary. I haven't seen any wolves or bears yet, luckily.
What technical problems did you have, and how did you solve them?
So even in about 1 hour after I started my journey from Singapore, my chain snapped, which is a problem I've never had before. And of course I had no parts of my chain, no quick link or anything. So I ended up walking to a bike shop, which luckily was only about 2 kilometers away, which is not an ideal start, but it could have been worse. I was luckily close to a bike shop. Then when I started the trip, I had the wrong cassette for my derailleur, so I couldn't use most of my gears, most of my low gears, so which was a bit of a problem, because up hills I couldn't really pedal because I couldn't use my low gears. So I got that changed in Bangkok. So I got a new cassette, and I needed a new rear hub because in my cassette it was not compatible with the old hub. So that was a expensive but necessary fix. And then I've had some other problems as well. I had cracks in my rear rim as I was cycling through China, so I got that fixed. I had to get a new rear wheel. Also the hole for my pannier bolts was rusted, and the whole hole came out, so I had to get some welding done, which lasted about a week before I had to get it welded again. But since then it's held strong, so I have to hope that that's gonna get me back home, but otherwise I'm going to have to do some more welding. And then on Lake Baikal, my rear brake failed because there was a hole in the brake line. So Artem has kindly helped me. He has fixed my brakes and also my new gear line. So thank you for that. You're a master mechanic.
Okay. How do you deal with bad weather?
Yeah, so rain is a pretty common occurrence. In Southeast Asia it was rainy but hot, so I didn't really do anything. I just kind of waited until it stopped. But you have to keep riding because it is quite a lot of rain at some times of the year. But at least you're still warm, so it's not a big problem. As I got further north, the rain's a bit colder, so you try to wear your waterproof, but after a few hours it doesn't really help. So there's not so much you can do about that. There's been snow, and that's colder, but any snow you can just brush it off, so you don't have to be wet inside your tent or anything. Yeah, snow can be a bit of a problem when it's on the road, and it makes it a bit dangerous conditions sometimes, so you have to be a bit careful. Hot weather, I haven't had any of that recently, but at the start definitely you have to make sure you keep hydrated and sun cream, that kind of thing. But yes, there's probably some more hot weather coming in the next few months, but for now it's still pretty cold.
How do you ensure bike safety at night and at cafe shops?
Yeah, so at night, normally I think it's just about finding a good spot to camp. It's quite well hidden, but sometimes you can lock it to a tree, lock it to your tent even. It's not the safest, but it's better than nothing.
Is it cheap or expensive to travel in Russia?
I think I haven't found it too expensive. The food has been quite cheap actually. I expected to Russia would be more expensive than the other countries I've travelled through in Asia, but actually the food has not been very expensive in Russia. I'd say maybe accommodation is a little bit more expensive than some other places in Southeast Asia, but I think compared to Western Europe, Russia's very good prices. So yeah, no complaints.
How do the locals treat you?
I've had only good experiences in Russia really. Many people have been starting conversations, or just when they see that my Russian is very, very bad, and they ask me where I'm from, and yeah, I have some good conversations with my very bad Russian.
But you speak to Russian in English, and
Normally,
Russian people can explain.
Most times, most people I've met do not speak English, so normally I have to speak with Russian, which means that I can't say so many things, but
Mixed Russian and
yeah,
English.
some people I've met speak a little English, so yeah, it's a fun challenge.
Tell us briefly about your equipment, tent, sleeping bag, and
Yeah.
other.
So I have just a small one-man tent. It keeps the rain out, keeps the snow out. The wind goes through the sides, but when you're in it, it's not going to blow away. Yeah, it's not a fancy tent, but it gets the job done. I have an inflatable mattress. I started with a thermal-rest mattress, but unfortunately that popped after about 1 or 2 days. And unfortunately the hole was too big to repair. So I was sleeping on the hard floor with no mattress for about 3 weeks, which wasn't so fun, but now I have another mattress which keeps me warm and comfortable. And then I actually have 2 sleeping bags right now, just in case it was very cold. One rated for 5 degrees and one for 0, and yeah, that keeps me warm even down to -20. No problems at all. Yeah, no pillow, but I wrap up my fleece. Just sleep on that, and that does the job quite well actually.
Like at home.
Yeah.
How do you keep in touch with your home and family?
Yeah, so I think this is just another thing where it's a lot easier nowadays compared to how it would have been some decades ago, because always just you pull out your phone and you can contact anyone online pretty easily. WhatsApp is what I usually use to keep in contact with my family and friends. Yeah, so it's quite easy nowadays.
What are the plans for the future? Are there specific countries and routes?
Yeah, so I know I'm heading to Kazakhstan, and hopefully after that I'll be heading into the Pamir highway through Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. After that we'll see. There's lots of different options, but we'll have to see how visas work out, and hopefully I can do it without having to fly or take any other kind of transport, but we'll see what happens.
What advice would you give to novice bike travelers?
I'm not sure I have any great advice, but if you are planning on doing a long trip by bicycle and it's something you want to do, I'd say just don't overthink it, because it's very easy. You want to do lots of training, you want all the perfect equipment, but really you don't need any of these things. You can start